I wanted to do a video on the origins of the KJV Bible. Of course, we don't need to argue about the validity of the text, as we can always refer to the sources of the original manuscripts that we have. However, there is still a lot of mysticism around the origins of the King James Bible, his influence and lifestyle, so I thought I'd do a video clearing up any misconceptions about how we got the King James version of the Bible. So to begin with, the KJV was not a new English translation. The translators were asked to improve on the existing Bibles we had translated into English. So I think it's best to start with the information on what these Bibles were and their influence on the KJV. First, we have the Wycliffe Bible of the 14th century. John Wycliffe, a theologian and religious reformer, was credited as being the first man to fully translate the Bible into English from the Latin Vulgate. This isn't true. He did, however, encourage a number of translations through his followers. This Bible circulated in manuscript format and didn't have the New Testament or a complete version until a lot later. The second English translation we had was the Tyndale. William Tyndale, known as the father of the English Bible, used Erasmus's Latin translation of the Greek New Testament that he had published in 1516 to produce an English version. This was in opposition to the Pope, and he was quoted as saying, "If God spare my life ere many years, I will cause the boy that driveth the plough shall know more of the Scripture than thou dost." In 1525 he had printed the New Testament. Then he had begun to learn Hebrew to translate the Old Testament, but it was incomplete and only the first 5 books in the book of Jonah were published. Many of his phrases from the translation would eventually make it into the KJV, such as "Let there be light," and "there was light." Also, it's because of Tyndale that we have the phrase Jehovah in English from the book of Exodus chapter 6 and verse 3. "And I appeared unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob by the name of God Almighty, but by my name, Jehovah, was I not known to them." Before this, the Tetragrammaton was usually transliterated as YHWH or JHVH. When the vowel points were added to the Hebrew consonants, the vowels of Adonai were added to JHVH to produce the compound word Jehovah. This was first used in Erasmus's Latin version, and Tyndale adopted it to his version. 83% of the KJV published in 1611 derives from Tyndale, either directly or indirectly through other Bibles that I will get to next. The Coverdale Bible. In 1535, Miles Coverdale, a former Augustinian friar who eventually became the Protestant Bishop of Exeter, published the first edition of the entire Bible in English. He used a Swiss version of the Lutheran Bible along with the Vulgate and a Latin translation from Sante Pagini that had the Old Testament divided into chapters with numbers and verses, which system would make it into English Bibles starting with Coverdale. Coverdale's Old Testament is his own translation of the German and Latin Bibles. His translations are in prose. He tried to capture the parallel structure of the Hebrew and translate it so it would sound natural in English. Then we have the Matthew Bible. John Rogers produced the first authorized English Bible. The first 5 books and New Testaments were Tyndale's translations. Rogers even used Tyndale's unpublished Old Testament books, which was Jonah to 2 Chronicles. The rest of the Old Testament and the Apocrypha were Coverdale's. He couldn't give credit to Tyndale as he was a heretic, so it was named the Matthew Bible. Next we have the Great Bible. Coverdale was again asked to make a translation based on the newer Matthew Bible, called the Great Bible because of its size. The Old Testament was revised in light of a new edition of the Hebrew Bible in 1535. The Geneva Bible. William Whittington took on most of the work for this translation that was published in 1560 and dedicated to Queen Elizabeth. This included the Old Testament, New Testament, and Apocrypha, although a lot of the Old Testament is based on the Great Bible translation. This was also an English version of the printed Bible that adopted verse numbers. The Bishop's Bible. The Geneva Bible displeased the bishops, so in 1568 they undertook a revised version of the Great Bible. The name comes from the fact that they had a large number of bishops that were on the revision committee. Finally, we have the Douay-Rheims Bible. The popularity of the Geneva Bible upset the Roman Catholics and the Anglicans, and they created a translation from the Vulgate. So these were the English versions of the Bible that the translators of the King James Bible had to work with. So why was King James involved with the translation of the Bible? After Queen Elizabeth's death in 1603, he was petitioned by the Puritans who weren't happy with the church being governed by the bishops. So in 1604, King James decided to bring the bishops and the Puritans together for a 3-day conference at Hampton Court Palace. The leader of the bishops was Richard Bancroft, who was the Bishop of London at the time, and the head of the Puritans was John Reynolds. It was Reynolds who requested a new English translation of the Bible because of the corruption to the Bible during the reigns of Henry VIII and Edward VI. This is slightly puzzling as the Great Bible was used during their reigns. Bancroft was unhappy with this suggestion, as they were happy with the Bishop's Bible of 1568, but King James agreed to the idea because he liked the idea of an authorized alternative to the popular Geneva Bible. Plus, it would make it look like he was conceding something to the Puritans, who had every other proposal rejected at the conference. This is why the dedication to King James describes him as the principal mover and author, because this Bible will come about because of a conference convened by him and was in effect an endorsement from the monarchy, not because he wrote any part of it. Bancroft's objection to the Bible was overruled, but he made sure that he would have a controlling hand in the selection of translators and provided a set of 15 rules to be observed in the translation. I'll go over a few of the more important ones. The Bishop's Bible was to be followed and as little altered as the truth of the original will permit. Every man of each company, and I'll talk about companies in a minute, every man of each company to take the same chapter or chapters and having translated or amended them severally by himself where he thinketh good, or to meet together, confer what they have done, and agree for their parts what shall stand. As any one company dispatch any one book in this manner, they shall send it to the rest to be considered of seriously and judicially, for his majesty is very careful in this point. If any company upon the review of the book so sent, doubt or differ upon any place, to send them word thereof, note the place and withal send their reasons, to which if they consent not, the difference to be compounded at the general meeting, which is to be of the chief persons of each company at the end of the work. The directors in each company to be the deans of Westminster and Chester for that place, and the king's professors in Hebrew or Greek in each university. These translations to be used when they agree better with the text than the Bishop's Bible, Tyndale's, Matthew's, Coverdale's, Whitchurch's, Geneva. These rules were unprecedented in their rigour. Previous translations had been done by small groups or bishops. Nothing comparable had been achieved since antiquity, when the elders gathered in Alexandria to create the Greek Septuagint. In fact, the KJV translators were determined to improve on the work of the elders because they noted that the elders only had 72 days to complete the translation, whereas the KJV translators would have sufficient time for revisions. We also know they added other guidelines retrospectively because of a report they made in 1619 at the Synod of Dort Conference in Dordrecht, dealing with the dispute between the Calvinists and the Arameans. Like the Hampton Court Conference, the Synod of Dort commissioned a new translation and asked the English translators about the procedures that they followed. They listed 3 rules that were not of the original 15. The translators were not being asked to create a new version of the Bible, but rather to revise the established version, removing any blemishes or inaccuracies. Parallel pages would be recorded in the margins, but there would be no marginal commentary. And where a Hebrew or Greek word admits 2 meanings of a suitable kind, the one that was to be expressed in the text, the other in the margin, the same to be done where variant readings were found in different but reputable versions of the Hebrew and Greek text. Now I'll briefly discuss the companies who translate the KJV. The process of translation and revision was to be undertaken by 6 companies, 2 in each of Westminster, Oxford and Cambridge. I don't want to list their names in this video, but they were experts in each company with knowledge of ancient Near East languages, Arabic, Greek, Hebrew, and Rabbinical Judaism. This is why I find it odd that some people believe that they weren't qualified to produce this translation. They were the leading experts of their day. I may do a separate video on them highlighting their talents, but if you wanted a list of names, many of them were listed in the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography. The First Westminster Company was responsible for the translation of Genesis to 2 Kings. The next section, First Chronicles to the Songs of Solomon, was the work of the First Cambridge Company. Then to finish completion of the Old Testament, the First Oxford Company translated Isaiah to Malachi. The Second Cambridge Company was responsible for the Apocrypha. John Reynolds was in opposition to its addition to the KJV. According to the rules sent out by Bancroft, this should have been led by Andrew Downes, Professor of Greek at Cambridge and the most competent man at the time. But it was John Duport who led the translation. This was probably due to the fact that he was a Puritan and it was a political move to keep the peace. The second Oxford team was responsible for the majority of the New Testament, the Gospels, Acts, and the Book of Revelation. The Second Westminster Company was responsible for the epistles. I can't really stress enough the amount of experience these teams had. I'll read a quote about them. The learning embodied in the men of these 6 companies is daunting. It is sometimes assumed that the people in the 21st century know more than the benighted people of the 17th century, but in many ways the opposite is true. When the 6 companies had finished their work, a general meeting was held daily over a period of 9 months to review their work. This happened in 1610. Then the work would be sent to Thomas Bilson and Miles Smith for review. Then finally the completed revision would be sent to Bancroft, who he himself made 14 revisions before it was printed. Now we know the KJV isn't perfect. We understand where errors were made, but those errors aren't because of corruption on the part of King James. He merely authorized the translation to keep the peace between the bishops and the Puritans. The KJV is the only effort by opposing groups to come together to produce an English translation of the Bible, as by the late 17th century the Baptists, Congregationalists and the Quakers would assert independence from the national church, which would then initiate dissenting traditions. I hope this video clears up how the KJV came to be. I've heard many different theories over the years, but I haven't heard anyone address the procedures they undertook, so I thought that I would do this short video. All praises to the Most High.